Welcome to the podcast for a Jesus Youth. We are a family of teenagers joining a movement of God through Portland and spreading to the ends of the earth. We believe that the Spirit of God is breaking out and working through us to bring the love of Jesus to a world in darkness. And we are all welcome on this journey. So enjoy the teaching. Peace.
If you have a Bible, if you want to grab it, turn with me to Matthew chapter 4. We're going to start there, and like Shelby said, I'm going to share just a little bit on the subject of doubt, and I want to read this passage to you because I think it kind of sets up what doubt is and how we all will go through seasons where we struggle and wrestle through uncertainty. So Matthew chapter, actually if you're in 4, that's fine, but go back a few verses to chapter 3, verse 16, Matthew 3:16. It says, as soon as Jesus was baptized, he went up out of the water, and at that moment heaven was open. And he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and alighting on him, and a voice from heaven said, "This is my Son whom I love. With him I am well pleased." Then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. So you guys have been in this series on the Holy Spirit, which I hear has been absolutely amazing. You've been talking about how to hear from God, how to listen to the Spirit, how to obey the Spirit. And that's such a beautiful thing. I'm so glad that you're doing that, because if you can get that now, if you can learn how to listen to the Spirit now, it's absolutely going to change the trajectory of your life, where you go, what you do, and it will help you avoid a ton of mistakes. But here's the thing that you need to know, is that the closer you get to God, and the closer you get to listening to the voice of the Spirit, the more that the enemy is going to come after you. It's like if you go up Mount Hood. The higher you get in elevation, the stronger, the windier it's going to get. And I think the higher you get in God, the more that the enemy is going to try and drag you down. He's going to try and destroy you and ruin your life and wreck your intimacy with God. He's going to do everything in his power to take you out. And there's all kinds of ways that he does that. But I think at the top of the list has to be this topic of doubt and discouragement. And it's interesting to see that Jesus, he was baptized by this guy named John the Baptist. We've talked about him a little bit in church. John, he was an interesting guy, long hair. He ate camels, or he didn't eat camels. He wore camel skin. He ate locusts. He would have fit in really good in Southeast Portland, just incredible, crazy guy. And he's in the wilderness, in the desert, and he's baptizing a ton of people. All these people are coming out, and Jesus was there. Can you imagine how amazing it would be to baptize Jesus? Like, what an honor that would be. What an opportunity that would be. And the moment he baptizes him, it says that the Father spoke and said, "You are my Son, who I love. In you I am well pleased." And I guess that's like the first thing I want you guys to know tonight, is that just as the Father spoke over his Son 2,000 years ago when he was baptized in the rivers of the Jordan, our Father speaks over us, he speaks over you, and he says, "You're my beloved daughter, you're my beloved Son. In you, I am well pleased." He is so proud of you. He is so in love with you. He has a hope and a future for your life. No matter what culture says about you, no matter what social media's box is trying to fit you in, no matter what you say about yourself, no matter what the enemy says about you, it's the voice of God that matters most. And what God says about you is the truest thing about you. And the truest thing about you is that you are loved. You are forgiven. You are holy. You are pure. You are the righteousness of God in Jesus, and nothing could separate you from his love. We are in the beloved, Ephesians 1 says. So even as the Father said, "You're my beloved Son, in you I am well pleased," he says that over you, he says that over me. You're my beloved daughter, you're my beloved Son. Now we can walk in that identity. So Jesus, he comes out of the water, he hears the Father speak, but there's one other thing that happens. It says the Spirit came on him like a dove. So he's filled with the Spirit. He's empowered by the Spirit. And immediately from there, it says, verse 1 of chapter 4, he goes into the desert. Now this is so interesting to me. Jesus, who was God, is filled with the Spirit of God. There's like a whole theology there. He's in tune with the Spirit. He's listening to the Spirit, just like you guys have been talking about what that looks like for your own life. But the very next thing that happens is that the enemy comes after him. And you can read chapter 4. We don't have time to go into that tonight. But the enemy comes after him. He tempts him in 3 different ways. And Jesus goes through this excruciating period of uncertainty, of struggle, of prayer, of fasting, and where Satan was trying to do everything in his power to take him out. Now listen, if Satan tried to take Jesus out when he was filled with the Spirit, how much more is he going to try and take us out too? Because we're not as strong as Jesus. And yet we have the same Spirit of God that is in us. And the enemy, he will try, whether it's tomorrow, next week, next year, 5 years from now, but he has a plan, a strategy, and a way that he wants to hurt you and destroy you and ruin you, especially if you're committed to living and walking in the Spirit. Now, if you're like lukewarm tonight, who was it, Shelby or whatever, talked about being on the fence. If you're in that place, then I don't think the enemy's going to come after you. But if you're in the flow of what God is wanting to do, man, Satan's going to try and take you out. You guys know this on Sunday. Sometimes I talk about how I used to be a missionary overseas. I use the word missionary carefully because I think we're missionaries here too. But I was overseas living in this country in a hut, basically, teaching at a school, no electricity, no running water. I was there for 3 years, right out of high school. It was the most incredible, beautiful, challenging season of my life. And in this country called Vanuatu, they didn't have like jaguars or tigers, but what they did have that was really dangerous were these snakes. And you had to be really, really careful, especially this one right here. I got him to pull one up. This is a coral snake. They called it black and white. That was how they call it in Vanuatu, in Bislama, the language they spoke. They call it black and white snake because it's black and white. It's like real innovative name. And they're like super dangerous. You get bitten by one of these black and white sea snakes, you probably have 10 or 15 minutes, and then you're gone. There's no hope for you. And so if you're swimming, and we'd swim every night to catch our food, our fish. They would spearfish. I was a terrible spearfisherman, but they always caught things. And occasionally you would see them, and whenever you saw them, everyone would scream and like swim for shore as fast as they possibly could. But the problem is that black and white sea snakes, they also knew how to live on shore. So you would occasionally see them hanging out in the rocks, and sometimes they would even bother us at the school where I was teaching at. And so I'm always like on edge for these black and white sea snakes. True story, one night, I'm sitting in my hut, and it was like 11:30 at night, and I'm reading, I'm praying, and it was just a sweet season for me. You know how God takes you through times where you can like really hear his voice, and it just seems the Spirit is so close to you, and it's just like this intimate time. And I look back at that season for my life, and it's one of the most beautiful seasons just with the Lord. And I'm sitting there, this desk I made out of some scrap wood, and I just have my Bible there, and I'm just reading and praying. I'm like writing down a few thoughts, and I have this little lamp with this flame because there's no electricity there, and I'm trying to still read. And then I hear this sound right by my feet. Now, because we were right by the coast and we had these huts, our ground wasn't like cement, it was coral. So I hear some coral move, and I look down, and about 6 inches from my feet was this massive black and white sea snake. It was huge. Every time I tell it, it's like bigger and bigger, but it was really big. And I don't know how I did it, but like simultaneously leapt out of my chair, grabbed this 2x4 that I just happened to have by my desk. I'm like, whoa! It's like this ninja, and I turn and I whack the sea snake, all in like one flowing thing. It was this epic moment. But the problem was, I hit the sea snake not on the head, which I was aiming for the head. I hit him in the middle. Now, little life hack for you. If you're ever in the jungle and you see a coral snake 6 inches from your feet, don't hit him in the middle. He was so mad. He takes off and starts chasing me. I'm in a hut, this round circular building. I have no way to escape because I couldn't stop long enough to open up the door, which was latched close. So I'm running in circles as this black and white sea snake is coming after me. So every few minutes or so, I'm like turning, trying to hit the thing, kept missing. It felt like hours. It was probably only like, I don't know, 2 or 3 minutes. But finally, I turned and I whacked him. It was like home run, bam, just nailed him on the head. The black and white sea snake went down. He was dead. I stood there poised like a triumphant gladiator. Like David killed his Goliath, I had killed my black and white sea snake. It was like this moment of triumph. It was absolutely incredible. Now, there's a whole other story to this, but don't have time to go into it. I played a horrific joke on some. Should I tell you guys this story? Okay. I've already gone there. Okay. It was April 1st, a couple days ago. My daughter played all kinds of tricks on me. So this one, I don't know if you can beat this one. And it's really bad. I still feel bad to this day, kind of. There was a prankster in our school. It was a school for like college-age students. And there's this one guy, his name was Charles, and he was always trying to play tricks on me. And he did, very successfully. And he could because he knew the culture and he knew how to scare me and all that. I didn't. I was new to the country, didn't know the language all that well. And I knew, though, that one thing he absolutely hated was snakes, for good reason. They can kill you. Well, Charles was an interesting guy because every day he took a nap. It was like his whole tradition. Right around 11:30 in the morning, he would take a nap for about an hour. He called it spell in his language. And I knew come 11:30 he would take a nap. So I took Sam the sea snake. I actually named the sea snake. And the next morning, I went up to Charles' hut. And it was like 11:15. I knew he'd be there soon. And I put Sam the sea snake underneath the blanket of his bed. I coiled him up, poised, just waiting for him, and then covered him up with the blanket, and I went and hid in the closet. It was such an incredible moment. So sure enough, a few minutes later, Charles, he just like waltz in, and he kicks off his sandals. They called them slippers in Vanuatu. And he sits down on the bed, and then he pushes his feet down, and he's like leaning back, and then he freezes. And I'll never forget this, he lifts up the blanket and looks down. You know how dogs can they can hear sounds that are super high-pitched? He made the kind of scream that I think only a dog could understand. It was like, it was so high-pitched, it was so intense. It was like, he screamed and jumped out of the bed, ran out of his hut. I'm watching this unfold, runs out of the school, and I didn't see him all afternoon. He was gone. Like, that was the end of Charles. So I'm like running after him, trying to find him, but he was gone. He comes back later that night. I think it was like 9 o'clock at night. We're all sitting around a fire talking, because that's all you do in Vanuatu at night. And he kind of walks in very quietly, very somberly, and he was just completely, you could see the color drain from his face and looked like he had gone through war. And he sits down, and by this point, everyone knew what had happened. They thought it was hilarious. So I asked him, Charles, what happened? Where have you been? And he's like, Dominic, Satan came to me today. I'm like, what? He said, yeah, Satan came to me. He was in my bed. Like, really? Tell me about this. Long story short, this was like a deep cultural thing. It's so horrible that I did this. In that culture, they believed that these sea snakes could actually turn into witch doctors, and that witch doctors could turn into sea snakes, and that it was like this satanic, demonic thing. And so he thought that Satan had actually come to his bed that day and was going to take him to hell. And so when he saw this, he was like the end of the world for him. And we're all listening to him as he's sharing this, and we're like, oh, no, that's not what happened. And I tried to tell him, and he finally thought it was hilarious, and then he got me back that's a whole other story, how he got me back, which I won't go there. Don't ever do that. I think to this day, I need counseling from my experience, and he probably does too. Where was I going with that? Oh, yeah. Okay, so this was a season where I'm like enjoying the Lord. I'm spending time with the Lord. And then the snake's there. Have you ever experienced this? Where you come away from a night at youth, you come away from a camp, you come away from a walk with Jesus, you come away from a time reading scripture, and then there's temptation. And then there's discouragement. And then you get bad news. And then it just seems like, the enemy's trying to drag you down. Listen, the closer you get to God, the more that the enemy will do his best to take you out. So here's the question. What do we do in those seasons? And what are some of the ways that he tries to take us out? I look at this story, and again, we don't have time to go into all the details, but in John chapter 4, if you keep reading it, I think the primary way that Satan was trying to take a spirit-filled Jesus out was through doubt. He's causing him to doubt God's call on his life. He's like, just worship me, and I'll give you all the kingdoms of the world, which for Jesus meant a shortcut from the cross. You don't have to die, Jesus. You don't have to go through suffering and betrayal and have people beat you up and spit on you. Just worship me now, and I'll give it to you all for free. Doubt. He's doubting God's provision. Hey, just command these stones to become bread. You don't know if God's really going to provide for you, and you've been fasting for 40 days. So you should probably work a miracle here. Doubting God's power, throw yourself off the temple, see if the angels catch you. I think the whole story of Matthew chapter 4 could be framed in doubt. And we've talked about on Sunday how doubt in and of itself is neutral. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but Satan, what he wants to do is take doubt and use it to drive a wedge between us and God. And he wants to poison it. And he wants to cause bitterness and uncertainty to grow in our hearts. And I promise you this, I guarantee this, if you haven't gone through it already, sooner or later you will go through a season in your life where you doubt. Sooner or later you're going to go through a season where you don't know, God, are you there? Can I trust you? Whether it's something you read in Scripture that causes your faith to be shaken. You read parts of the Bible, you're like, I love this is beautiful. And then you come to other parts, you're like, I don't get it. This is weird or barbaric or bloody. Or doubt that comes as a result of being in a church community. And many of us have experienced this. I know I have. You get burned by Christians. That can really hurt. Sheep bites, and they bite really bad. And sometimes you wonder when that happens, is any of this true? Or doubt that can happen as a result of pain and suffering. A friend talks about suicide. You go through a time of anxiety, or you can't seem to kick depression, or you watch helpless as your parents are getting a divorce and you wish you could do something about it. Or a close friend of yours walks away from Jesus and their faith. And it's those kinds of things that will shake us to the core. And when you go through a season like that, you need to know two things. Number one, you are not alone. Jesus went through it. He knows what it's like to be in dry and dusty places. He knows what it's like to have the snake right there by his side trying to take him out. He knows what it's like to have the enemy whisper in his ear, just give up, walk away, it's not worth it. He was tempted in all ways as we are, and yet without sin. He's experienced it, he's gone through it. You are not alone. And it's not just that Jesus has gone through it. All around you are people who are going to go through that as well. 2/3 of Americans who identify as Christians say that they struggle with doubt. 70% of high schoolers who are a part of a high school youth group, and this breaks my heart, by the time they graduate, 70%, according to a recent stat, will walk away from their faith. So doubt is the air that we breathe. So many people are struggling with it, wrestling with it, and where the enemy tries to get in is he's going to whisper in your ear and say, you're the only one. No one can understand. No one's going to get it. You can't share this with others, and that is a lie. Because you have people around you who would love to help you and support you and encourage you and walk with you through this season. He will never leave you or forsake you. But the second thing you need to know is this. You can be brutally honest, not just with the people around you, but you can be brutally honest with God. You can bring your doubts and uncertainty and discouragement and pain and loneliness and questions to him. Jesus said, come to me when you're weary and heavy laden, and you will find what? Does anyone know? Rest. He didn't say, come to me when you got it all together and your faith is perfect. He said, come to me when your faith is broken. That's when you're going to find rest for your soul. In 1 Peter 5, it says, cast all your cares on him because he cares for you. God can handle your doubts. God knows what it's like to be in the desert. God invites you to come with whatever it is that you're wrestling through, even tonight, come boldly before his throne of grace, and you find grace and mercy to help in time of need. You know, I used to play basketball, and it was absolutely terrible. I was a part of a city league, which isn't like that big a deal, but for us it kind of was, and our team did really well. But I, on the other hand, was literally the worst basketball player. I was so bad that the coach, true story, told me, Dom, thanks for being on the team, but I'm going to have you sit out the rest of the season. It was game 1 when he told me that. Like, okay. He's like, just be here for moral support. So I was there at all the games, hanging out. But Keith and I was like, we've shot hoops in the back. I'm absolutely dreadful. So I was there kind of encouraging the team or whatever. And our team, without me, made it to the finals. Again, not that big a deal, but for the team it was. And they're playing this final game of the season in the final game, in the final whatever championship. And they were ahead. Well, it turns out one of our guys got injured. There was a couple minutes left. This story is so crazy, and it's 100% true. One of our guys gets injured. The coach comes to me, and he's like, look, we have 2 minutes left in the game. We're ahead by a few points. I'm going to put you in. I'm like, really? You haven't put me in all season. Like, I don't even know what to do. What's basketball? He's like, listen, Dom, all you need to do, when you get the ball, he said, don't shoot it. He said, get the ball to Josh. Now, Josh was our star player. He could slam dunk, all of that. I'm like, okay, get the ball to Josh. So I walk out there, and he grabbed me again. He's like, get the ball to Josh. Okay, get the ball to Josh. So I go out there, we're playing, and we're like in the final minute or whatever. I get the ball, and I was so excited. It was like, and I guess I kind of panicked or something. And I shot it. And true story, it was a 3-pointer. I shot in the only game that I played, the only time that I had it, I shot a 3-pointer. But my team wasn't cheering because I shot it on the wrong side. The other team got the 3 points, and they went on to win the game. Isn't that absolutely horrific? It's absolutely terrible. Now, I'm definitely in counseling for that. It's so bad. Have you ever gone through a time, and I'll close with this. Have you ever gone through a time where you don't know what team you're on? When I wrote my book, I share in chapter 4, which, by the way, I'm giving it to you guys for free tonight if you want a copy. We have like 80 copies available. And they're, for free. Yeah, give it up. Woo! I shared how I went through a time that was kind of like that. Actually, more than kind of like that. I had almost lost my faith. I didn't know what team I was on. Doubt feels that way. Is any of this true? Which side am I on? Are there sides? What does this look like? It's really confusing. And I want you to know, in that season, for me, the only thing that got me through it was bringing it to Jesus, being honest with Jesus, getting the ball to Jesus. And that is the only thing that's going to get through your season of crisis, hurt, pain, loneliness, loss, the desert, doubt, is by bringing it to Jesus, being open and honest and truthful, not holding anything back, being all in. And you know what? What you'll find is not a father who says, get out of here. I can't believe you have doubts. I can't believe you have questions. What you're going to find is a father who says, you're my beloved son. You're my beloved daughter. In you, I am well pleased.